Colleagues, are there any questions?
I'll dive in, why not? Thank you very much. The idea of adding more time for math at middle school is definitely something we've talked about and looked at some different models and haven't been successful in making any major shifts in the schedule. The strategies course is one method. I'm liaison to Swanson, and I don't know if your committee's familiar with this, but what they've done is for students identified as needing some extra help in math, they're assigned to a teacher advisory, TA, who's a math teacher, and then that time is spent on math, and then first period is math, so they end up with a longer block of math. And my understanding is the sense is that that's been pretty successful. So have you looked at some other models as well in middle school to try and add time for math instruction?
Have we?
We have talked about how you might use that TA period. We have not kind of reached any conclusions as to a single solution. I don't know if there's any other comments you'd want to add. It's obviously a problem to be solved.
Sure. I just think as we always know, there are often best practices out there and innovative solutions, and it's just important to make sure we know what those are. We're identifying them and looking at those. So I think there may be some others already out there that we could take a look at. Math coaches, that is definitely something. Having halftime math coaches at all of our schools is something I supported when I first got on the board. That was a discussion that we had then. But I'll ask you the same question that I asked a year ago when this came up, which is, do we know that we need a full-time math coach at every elementary school? Are there, and one of the data points you talk about is maybe having enough data to know the difference between the effect of a half-time and a full-time. Are there some schools where the math achievement is such that that resource is sufficient and maybe they need a different additional resource of a specialist or other staff member?
You mean some schools within APS?
Mm-hmm.
Or, okay.
Right.
Obviously, it's the non-Title I schools that have the halftime math coach, and being the math committee, we would love to get our hands on more data, especially of the longitudinal variety, so you can actually tell the impact that type of resource has on students. So in the absence of that, we have kind of anecdotal information from principals and from schools, and knowing that at all schools, independent of what the average achievement are, there are achievement gaps. And you also have more aggressive SOLs that have been pushed down into the elementary age. So that is the data set that we have to work with right now. Would welcome the ability to have more to be able to, quantitatively assess what impact that would have.
Yeah, and I think as a board, as we think about a recommendation like that, to be able to really seriously consider it, because it does involve a significant cost, we would need to have the data to support that that's going to be a good investment for us.
So will the board have that data?
I think that's a discussion that we'll have as we're thinking about moving forward and what areas we want to look at. And then finally, just on the flip model, I think it is a very interesting idea. Obviously, there are technology issues to make sure that every student would have the ability to do that, but there's a lot of writing and talk out there about that model, and I think it could be really interesting to find out who's doing it and how it's working, and if that's something that we could start to think about in APS.
Imagine you'll see that in January.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Simon?
Thank you. Mark, we're all dressed up. Usually we're on the soccer field together, so here we are, all grown
Where
up.
have you been?
I too was intrigued with the flipped classroom. I've seen some things. I think CNN did a piece on it and some others. Are we basing this on a particular school division or just the idea that this is a new model of math instruction? Is there somewhere we should be looking to better understand the flip model?
So from a math committee standpoint, we've spoken to middle school teachers, and we've looked at, we've gotten their feedback on it. I think that it's a candidate for the secondary level. I think that it probably warrants some pilot, some study, as opposed to some anecdotal use in the classroom.
Okay, there is a middle school. Does anyone know what middle school that is that's using? Williamsburg Middle School apparently is using it, but I'm not sure how far we've dug into that.
Okay.
But it seems, obviously we need to start, beyond the first tier and getting into who's been doing it. And like, for instance, I said in words, and I'm assuming it's also in the report, that apparently there are some, that we basically are looking at these models, but we just need to, move on from there.
That's an example of a new, it sounds like fairly new idea. The board restored 2 SOL positions at Wakefield, and several of us saw the math lab there. And the numbers were out. It was remarkable how many students go through that. As we took a step back, though, as one board member, I thought, that's a lot of students going in for supplemental work. I wonder if the committee has looked at maybe not necessarily what some of the causes are going to be, but are there remedies that we can put in place without having to go new with everything? So obviously budget is always a concern of ours, but kind of getting at that. We restored the positions and we were happy to do that. Ideally, it would be that we wouldn't have to ever have those positions and the supplemental work wouldn't need to be done. I think that's unrealistic anywhere. But has the committee taken a look at that, where some gaps are right now and addressing those specifically?
I think that's one of the reasons why we want to look at how we might be able to bubble up best practices of what's already being done. I think it's also, there's different approaches to the flipped classroom. There's content out there, like varying degrees of quality. There are also teachers that are creating their own content with the tools that they have now. Obviously, there are some teachers that are more comfortable in that environment than others, so that in itself kind of introduces some learning needs, professional development. I think there's a lot. I mean, I think that's why we've got it under consideration to try to figure out what that might look like, what a recommendation around that might look like. Is it for a pilot? Is it to kind of see what it would take to implement as an option?
Okay, I think that'll fit in nicely to the revised timeline for ACI overall. That could be very helpful to us as we move through the budget cycle. Thanks again.
Ms. Baer? I have some questions. I am very interested in your recommendation or the thoughts that you have brought forward, integrating math into other subjects. I hope that you can continue to explore that, and the idea also of collaborating with other, because we are so rich in Arlington. We have so many research groups. We have Virginia Tech. We have, Science Foundation. We have many others that I have been very impressed, at least with Thomas Jefferson High School for Technology in Fairfax, where the students are doing a lot of research in collaboration with other partners. And so the question that I have is, are we doing that in Arlington? And is this a model where we see more application of mathematics concepts in real life or in projects or in research? So, I am really intrigued about that, and because that would probably challenge a lot of students to apply what they are learning in the classroom, right? Is that one of your ideas?
Yeah, from personal experience, I was talking to my daughters. I have 3 children. My middle one is in 5th grade, and her math instructor was using an insurance company as an example of where you can apply statistics. I'm like, there's so much more.
Yeah.
So I think there's a real opportunity there to tie to real life applications, to take advantage of what's local. And to have it based in real world, which I think would appeal to the students as well.
Yeah, and I have one more. In your report, you talked also about the teachers who are teaching English language learners, and I think that's happening in the middle school. And as you're looking at the middle school, I'm also concerned because in those HILT classes, I don't know if the students are getting grade level math. And what we have seen when we have been looking at achievement gaps, we see the growth at the elementary level, and then in the middle school, for me, it seems to be an area where we start seeing a lot of divergence, with gaps. And so what is happening there? And if there's some models like Ms. Raphael mentioned about Swanson, or if there's another model at Williamsburg or whatever other models, I think that this is an area that we are very interested in seeing what works. And your report is really thought-provoking and creative. Thank you.
Great.
Thank
thanks
you very
much.
much.